Once again this weekend, our parish is enjoying the fun and camaraderie that we've come to expect in our annual Light of Broadview. Thanks to the dedicated work of the parish staff, the organizing committee, and all the volunteers, we come together each year to celebrate our oneness as a faith community. But pause for just a moment and consider that amidst the music, food, and carnival rides, Lazarus is here among us. What's interesting in today's gospel is that the rich man wasn't punished for anything he actually did with Lazarus. We're not told that he shouted at Lazarus or abused him in any way. Rather, he was guilty of not having done anything to alleviate this poor man's need. Similarly, in the first reading, Amos castigates the rich in Israel, not so much for their ivory seats and their golden vessels, but for their neglect when Joseph was ruined as he was sold into slavery. In other words, the rich in these two stories were guilty of sins of omission. They sinned not by what they had done, but what they had failed to do. Jesus often challenges us to expand our way of thinking. We may feel justified in saying that before we consider the needs of others, it should be acknowledged that we've worked hard for what we have. Maybe we're uneasy about giving to the poor during these uncertain economic times, when we're living on a shoestring budget or living from paycheck to paycheck. Besides, we couldn't begin to help the vast needs of so many poor in Seattle, let alone the whole world. On top of that, we're good church-going people and would never judge or offend any of the poor. But all of this is beside the point. Jesus wants us to ask ourselves, do we do enough to respond to the poor? The concept of neighbor in the Old Testament was understood to be someone's countryman and to foreigners who had settled in Israel. Because of Jesus' message, this limited concept of neighbor was abolished. All human beings are God's creatures. Anyone who needs us and whom we can help is our neighbor. As members of this faith community, we can certainly agree with this New Testament concept of neighbor. It's a fairly easy concept to understand. How to apply this concept after we leave Mass today is what is far more difficult. All of us, including me, tend to fall back into our comfortable, routine lifestyles as soon as we leave the church. But being a disciple of Jesus is not always easy. We often must live in the tension between our understanding of what it takes to be a Christian and putting that understanding into practice. Our parish is blessed to have a ministry that allows those of us who participate in it to break through that tension. It's not easy, though. Several years ago, our parish created an outreach ministry to the St. Martin de Porres homeless shelter for men. During the cold months between October and April, our parish takes care of 7 men each Sunday who are overflow from the shelter. The shelter can only handle so many men. Once other shelters have been contacted to try and place the extra men for the night, it's common that there are still men left with no place to sleep during those cold nights. This is where our parish comes into play. We have a St. Martin de Porres parish ministry in which volunteers drive down to the shelter on Sunday to pick up the extra men that night. The driver takes them into the Fitzgerald room where mats have been laid out for them to sleep on. Chaperones spend the night with the men, making sure that they're comfortable. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the driver returns to pick up the men and takes them wherever they want to be dropped off in downtown Seattle. Each week, our school children prepare a lunch for each man. After 1 year of ignoring this ministry, I felt compelled to volunteer to drive to and from the shelter. It's not easy that on a cold winter night to leave the comfort of your home and drive down to the Stadium District of Seattle to pick up total strangers. It would be much easier to ignore the fact that there are people sleeping on the streets of Seattle during the cold months of the year. Not always with the right frame of mind, I left my home on those cold sunny nights and drove to St. Martin de Porres. Prayer was often the only thing that refocused me for what I was about to do. What seemed difficult to begin with became increasingly easier when these strangers became human beings with a name and a story. Early one Monday morning, I had dropped off all but one of the men. I asked him where he wanted to be let out, and we started a conversation. This total stranger that I had only come in contact with the night before was born and raised in Seattle. He was raised Catholic and graduated from O'Day High School. Now, as a graduate of Seattle Prep, I resisted the urge to make the snide remark that he should have gone to Prep. But I learned that he had lost his job and subsequently his home. He was sleeping in his car most nights, but on particularly cold nights, he swallowed his pride and went to the shelters. He liked St. Martin de Porres because, besides getting dinner, he knew that there was a good chance that he would be able to sleep indoors in a familiar church facility. This person whose name I've forgotten was no longer a stranger and will be a part of me for the rest of my life. Why am I giving you this personal experience? It's not to make me or other parishioners who serve the homeless seem holier than thou. It's to put a face on the poor. It's to help bring home the point that in God's eyes, none of us are strangers. We are all children of God. Just as the Good Samaritan helped a total stranger, so too should our parish continue to help the homeless through this small parish ministry. God has given us an opportunity through this parish ministry to expand our understanding of who our neighbors are. The sad fact is that this parish ministry is under stress. The number of volunteers has continued to decrease over the years. Our parish friends who continue to help these homeless strangers are being stretched. We need a new wave of enthusiasm. We need to put into practice what we all know should be done from the message in today's gospel. Our parish has done a good job of not reducing today's gospel to generic or abstract expression of love, but has made the story of Lazarus and the rich man come to life. But we need more of us to make that expression of love an ongoing reality. It won't be easy, but nothing important typically is. So when the call for our outreach to St. Martin de Porres takes place in a week or two, and I noticed it was in the bulletin today, remember that the law of love means that each of us is called in some way to show mercy to the poor. As the rich man learns in the parable of Lazarus, the distance between God and ourselves in the next life may be the distance we put between the poor and us in this life. We may not be a rich man or exploiters of the poor, but each of us should take to heart the persistent message of the gospel that the material goods that we have or desire to have can separate us from God and our neighbor. That our possessions can come to possess us. That true riches are to be found in sharing not only our money, but our time with the poor. This will gain us what we truly desire, eternal life with God. God bless you.